pronouns she, her, and I serve this church today as your service leader. Before we blend our voices in song, a few reminders. If you are visiting us for the first time today, you are especially welcome. Phyllis at the visitors table by the door can help you get oriented if you have any questions. We also have fidget toys in our library by the hallway, and we welcome anyone and everyone to take a look whenever you wish. Today's opening hymn is number 288, All Our Architects, in your gray hymnal. Please rise in spirit or body as you are comfortable. Some stories begin once upon a time or long, long ago. But other stories begin here and now. Those stories don't always have a clear direction. Sometimes they don't even have a clear beginning. What they do have is possibility. Those are stories still in the making, stories that have yet to be fully written, stories with the potential to create change for good or ill. We won't know how the story ends until we get there, but we can decide what words we use to write those stories. Words like hope, kindness, gratitude, peace, courage, perseverance, joy, and love. Above all else, love. Please take a moment of 30 seconds of silence with me. Welcome to Holston Valley Unitarian Universalist Church. This morning, we welcome Bradley to the pulpit to learn more about the Library of Alexandria and the stories surrounding it. And now we are going to invite Bradley to come help us with our chalice lighting. Bradley has been an 8th grader for 4 years, and he likes visiting graves and museums. As Bradley lights a chalice, please join me in saying our vision statement, which is printed in your bulletin. We work together as a church to transform ourselves, our community, and our world by sharing love, pursuing justice, and seeking wonder. This morning, we are going to create a story together. If I ask you for something, like a verb or a noun, shout it out, and I'll write it down. All right, I need an amount of time. An hour. Oh, I need lead. That's what I need. A feeling. Oh, let's try that again. I need one feeling. Bewildered. Can I write bewilderment? Perfect. I need a verb. Running. I need a job title. Nurse. Another verb, preferably a different one. Jump. I need a place. H-E-U-C. Great. I need a pronoun. He, she, they.
They.
They. I like they. And a different verb.
Eat.
I need a number.
72.
72. An animal or person.
Dog.
Dog. I need a name.
Sarah.
Sarah? Sure. Adjective.
Fabulous.
Fabulous. A different, a verb.
Walk.
I heard walk and we're gonna go with walk. All right, let me make sure I have them all filled in here. Let's go with another verb. Someone who hasn't spoken yet. Ski. And, all right, are we ready? Okay. I'm making sure everything we'll find out if it makes sense, I guess. Water, earth, fire, air. An hour ago, the four nations lived together in bewilderment. Then, everything changed when the Fire Nation ran. Only the nurse, master of all four elements, could jump over them. But when HVUUC needed them most, they ate. 72 years passed, and my dog and I discovered the new nurse, an airbender named Sarah. And although their airbending skills are fabulous, they have a lot to learn before they're ready to walk. But I believe Sarah can ski to HVUUC. I did this with my children, and they decided that the park was in dire straits, so they had to save the park. Thank you, everyone, for your input. For those who don't know, there's an original version of this that's beloved by many of us, and it's the opening to Avatar: The Last Airbender. And it tells the story of a legend and how two teenagers found him. Our story is a little bit different, but it does have some of the similar structures to the original, such as Airbender and Fire Nation. Stories are told and heard in a multitude of ways, sometimes even changing as they pass from person to person or from generation to generation. Sometimes they'll tell a historical moment or a lesson, and sometimes they'll make you laugh or cry. Sometimes they're fantasy, and sometimes they're truth. And stories are how we engage with the world and with each other. So thank you for engaging with me and with each other to create this new story, even if it is a little silly.
A beacon of knowledge stands above all the rest, a labyrinth of information, all of the best, the pride of all scholars, bringing learning to life, a modern incarnation of the greatest minds. There it began at the architect's hand, and after this battle they'll begin it again. The Capitol is rebuilt as history speaks, that even when lost, history will repeat. But now it falls by the wrath of kings. This place once great, brought down to its knees. The things we kept here will not live past. The things we learned are reduced to ash. Tell me we can bring it back to life, so all that was lost can be revived. When it's rebuilt, it won't be the same. The future will forget our names. From the foundation, you're beginning anew. So much in your reach, there's so much you can do. At your fingertips, the stories of the land. You're only just starting and it's all in your hands. Ever since you remember, you love to learn. You studied the fires to understand how they burn. Eyes bright with conviction, you step toward faith, assured in your vision that you'd make something great. But at your feet, it burns where you stand. Ambitions crushed by an unknown hand. Your heart is scorched and laid to waste. All your efforts have been erased, but you can't fall now when you've gone this far. You can rebuild once you win this war. You stand as a beacon of knowledge, my friend, and you are the architect living again. Alexandria's library burned long ago. Its writings were lost, but you're not lost alone. Even destroyed, it was rebuilt again. So draw your sword, soldier, scholar, draw your pen.
Come to this community with all that you are. Your joys and your concerns are welcome here. We share our moments of joys and sorrows with us by using candle cards if you are with us in person, or by emailing Reverend Tiffany at minister@hvuc.org with the words candle card in the subject line. She is on sabbatical until September. At the moment, I'm unsure what we do with that, but I just want to let everyone be aware. Please make sure to indicate whether or not you would like the card read aloud in the service, which is being broadcast publicly on YouTube. The process of lighting candle will not show any individuals on the YouTube video. So we have 2 candle cards this morning. We have one from Noel and a candle of joy. Joy to see so many members of HVUUC at the town hall meeting of Unheard Voices as we celebrated Good Trouble Lives in honor of Representative John Lewis. Another candle of joy from Greg and Betty Kramer. Greg and Betty Kramer and Neil Sanders just returned from Susie, a week-long UU camp. Friendship, fellowship, and native trips were the order of the day. If you wish to light your own silent candle, approach the side of the table that is closest to you, and the closer candle keepers will assist you. This is also the time kids can put in money for the kids' collection plate. The children voted on what cause they would like to support, and they voted to give money to alleviate hunger in Tri-Cities. Please light the candles at the back of the table first so that no one has to reach over and open flame. And if you wish for us to light a candle for you, please raise your hand until I acknowledge you, and I will ensure a candle is lit for your intention. Our community is so much larger than just those of us who are in the building this morning. So we light a candle to hold space for those who are not physically present with us, but are ever in our hearts. A final candle for all that remains unspoken in our hearts and minds. An excerpt from My Libraries by Ursula K. Le Guin. A library is a focal point, a sacred place to a community, and its sacredness is its accessibility, its publicness. It's everybody's place. I remember certain libraries vividly and joyfully as my libraries, elements of the best of my life. The first one I knew well was in St. Helena, California, then a small, peaceful, mostly Italian town. The library was a little Carnegie, white stucco, cool and sleepy on the fiery August afternoons when my mother would leave my brother and me there while she shopped at Guigny's and Tossetti's. Carl and I went through the children's room like word-seeking missiles. After we had read everything, including all 13 volumes of The Adventures of a Fat Boy Detective, we had to be allowed to go into the adult side. That was hard for the librarians. They felt like they were hurling us little kids into a room full of sex, death, and weird grown-ups like Heathcliff and the Joads. And in fact, they were. We were intensely grateful. The only trouble with the St. Helena Library was you could only take out 5 books at a time, and we only went into town once a week. So we checked out really solid books. 500 pages of small print in 2 columns, like The Count of Monte Cristo. Next in my life was Radcliffe's small, endearing college library. And then, when they decided I could be permitted to enter it, even though I was a freshman, and what was far worse, a fresh woman, Widener Library at Harvard. I will tell you my private definition of freedom. Freedom is stack privileges at Widener Library. I remember the first time I came outside those endless, incredible stacks. I could barely walk because I was carrying about 25 books, but I was flying. I turned around and looked up at the broad steps of the building, and I thought, that's heaven. That's the heaven for me. All the words in the world, and all for me to read. Free at last, Lord, free at last. I hope you'll understand that I am not quoting those great words lightly. I do mean it. Knowledge sets us free. Art sets us free. A great library is freedom. Plunging into the ocean of words, roaming in the broad fields of the mind, climbing the mountains of the imagination. Just like the kid in the Carnegie or the student at Widener, that was my freedom. That was my joy. And it still is. That joy must not be sold. It must not be privatized, made into another privilege for the privileged. A public library is a public trust. And that freedom must not be compromised. It must be available to all who need it. And that's everyone, when they need it. And that's always.
Hello, everybody. So today I'm going to talk about the Library of Alexandria. I'm going to speak first of the legend of the library, just so we're all on the same page on what's the legend of the library, and then why people are fascinated with this legend, the truth behind the legend, and why should we care about this ancient library. So this is the legend of the library. 2,300 years ago, Alexander the Great conquered Egypt. And he created a city along the Mediterranean Sea named for himself Alexandria. Because Alex was a student of Aristotle, he cared a lot about learning and wanted to create a big library in the city that would collect knowledge from all over the world. Unfortunately, Alexander died before that could happen, so Ptolemy I carried out Alexander's wishes. This library had tons of scrolls, but also had lecture halls and classrooms because it wasn't just a library, it was a place for scholars to live and work together, with the government being their patron. Ptolemy I did that. When Ptolemy III takes over, he begins a rule that every ship that docks in Alexandria must give all the scrolls that they have to the library. The scribes at the library would then create high-quality copies of those scrolls, keep the originals, and give the ships the copies. Over time, this would lead to tons and tons and tons of scrolls at the library. Ptolemy III also paid people to comb the Mediterranean Sea for more scrolls to bring to the library. And this library had some pretty big deal scholars in its day. Aristophanes, he was living in Alexandria, and he calculated the size and circumference of the earth 3,000 years before Columbus made his voyage. Heron created the steam engine thousands of years before the Industrial Revolution. Euclid, the father of geometry, worked there. Hipparchus, the father of trigonometry, worked there. Aristophanes, the father of comedy, worked there. A lot of ancient scientists and authors whose shoulders we stand on as a civilization worked at Alexandria. However, one day, a villain came along and destroyed the library. The villain changes based on who's telling the story. Some say Julius Caesar did it in 46 BC when he conquered Egypt. Some say it was Christian zealots who didn't like non-Christian institutions in 391 AD. Some say it was the Muslims in 641 AD when they conquered Egypt. That's the legend, right? And history buffs and total nerds are still upset about it to this day. They think the destruction of the library led to the Dark Ages. They think the destruction of the library set us back as a species for 1,000 years. Oh, woe is we, for our cherished library is smote upon the ground. And I personally love this legend. I love the idea of giant libraries, and I'm willing to bet you like the idea of giant libraries too. My favorite episode, which Sarah referenced in The Time for All Ages, my favorite show of all time is Avatar: The Last Airbender. And my favorite episode of that show is Season 2, Episode 10, The Library. The main characters, they search for a long-lost library that contains all the knowledge of the world to find a secret strategy to defeat their enemy. And the library is in a desert, like Egypt. And it has tons of scrolls, and they have people that go over the world and find these scrolls to bring to the library, like Ptolemy III did when he was king. And the library was partially destroyed by someone who didn't want the knowledge of the library to be shared, like the villains in the legend. When I was younger and I played Minecraft, the only thing I would make in Minecraft would be giant libraries. I play Dungeons & Dragons, and I've been playing a certain character for 2 years where he is a 600-year-old wizard named Varus who built a giant library that mysteriously burned to the ground. Am I making myself clear? I really like the idea of giant libraries. Now, like I said, most of what people know about the library is the legend that I just said. But the thing is that most of the sources we have on the library were in hundreds of years later after it was allegedly destroyed. And these sources do not mention any firsthand accounts. They don't mention where they got this knowledge. So there's a lot of myths about the library based off of these later sources, so I'd like to do some myth busting. Myth number 1, the knowledge from the library was lost. No. If you remember, the scribes at the library would make copies of the scrolls and would give the brand new copies back to the owners. So now there's 2 scrolls on the planet about whatever instead of just 1 scroll. So if anything, the library, their efforts doubled the amount of knowledge on the planet. And anyway, even if the entire library did go poof, the knowledge didn't go poof with it. The Library of Alexandria wasn't the only library in the world. There were other libraries all over the Mediterranean with rulers who would gladly support scholars. The Library of Pergamon in Turkey, the Baghdad House of Wisdom in modern-day Iraq, the Library of Ephesus in Greece. These are just a few examples and actually kind of competed with the Library of Alexandria for fame. Myth number 2, there were tons of scrolls at the library. So here's the thing. The scrolls at this library were made of papyrus. In a dry environment like the Egyptian desert, papyrus can last hundreds or thousands of years. But Alexandria is on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. It is not dry. It is very humid. So that papyrus would have fallen apart in 100 years. These scrolls would have to be maintained. So if the library were to have tons of these scrolls, they would have to be a lot of scribes employed to constantly copy the older scrolls and replace them before they deteriorated. And the library lasted, from what we know, the library lasted about 250 years. So all of those 250 years, the library would have to be well-funded, well-staffed, and in a politically stable environment in Alexandria. And that is not likely. Also, we have no clue how many scrolls there were. Seneca says in his dialogues 40,000 books were burned at Alexandria. Aristeas, a Marmora, wrote that the library had more than 200,000. Paulius Aureus wrote, the flames spread to part of the city and there burned 400,000 books. Ammianus Marcellinus wrote, in this were invaluable libraries, and the unanimous testimony of ancient records declares 700,000 books. So the records we have, these records, remember, were written hundreds of years later. After the library, the records range the amount of scrolls from 40,000 books to 700,000, and all of that is questionable. If it were books, like a codex book that we have now, maybe. But these are scrolls, and scrolls take up way more space than books. You can only write on one side with scrolls, and they take up more linear space, and they're more unwieldy, and we know how big the building was. The building just wasn't that big enough to hold that many scrolls. And it's not just a building with shelves upon shelves upon shelves. There's tables and chairs and statues and stuff. So the scrolls would likely be along just the walls. And so it's much less room than you think. Roger Bognall, he does some math that gives us a more realistic idea. If you were to take the total amount of words ever written on the entire planet before the year 100 AD, you would have 4 million words total. And if every scroll had 10,000 words each, you would have a total of 377 scrolls. 370, and that's the max, according to Roger's math. So it's possible that this giant library of myth and legend is just 377 scrolls. And ancient writers just inflated that number, as they do with most numbers. And that's still an impressive number, by the way. I'm not poo-pooing that amount. In the ancient world, where scrolls are handwritten and expensive, having more than 20 is very rare. So these people, a building with 377 scrolls, to them, that's a feat. That's a triumph. Of course, they're going to keep talking about it hundreds of years later. It should be something to be revered. Myth number 3. Some villain came along and destroyed the library. So let's talk about the first villain, Julius Caesar. The only source we have from that time period that talks about Caesar's invasion of Alexandria has this quote: "He burned all those ships and the rest that were in the docks because he could not protect so wide an extent with his small force." In this source, there is no mention of Caesar burning anything except the ships he used to get to the city. The sources that blame Caesar for the library's burning were written 200 years later. And these sources say that when Caesar set fire to the ships, the fire, quote, spread from the dockyards and destroyed the great library. But that was 200 years later. It is possible that Caesar burned a portion of the library. It's possible. But definitely not the whole library, because a geographer named Strabo wrote about the Library of Alexandria 30 years after Caesar supposedly burned it. So Caesar did not destroy the entire library. And the next possible villain are the Christians. The story goes that Because the library's contents were written by non-Christians, a mob of Christians raided the building, killed its chief librarian, Hypatia, and had a good old-fashioned book burning. And this would have happened in the year 391. By the year 391, the Library of Alexandria did not exist anymore. What did exist was a totally different library. See, there were actually two libraries in the history of the city of Alexandria. The first one that I've been talking about the whole time was called the Museum. It was a temple to the Muses. That's why it's called the Museum. The Muses are Greek goddesses of the arts and sciences. This is where they had all those scrolls and scholars. This building lasted from 250 BC to 50 BC. It lasted 200 BC years. By 391 AD, it was a 400-year-old memory. What was there in 391 was a temple to Serapis, an Egyptian god similar to Zeus and Osiris, and this building's called the Serapeum. Totally different location, and 400 years later. It was common in temples to have a temple library, which wasn't big and important. The building itself is not a library, it's a temple, and they just happen to have a small collection of books within the temple, no different than the church library over there. This building, the Serapeum, was a plaza with the temple part in the center, a couple of other buildings, and there was a double colonnade around the whole thing, and inside the colonnade were books. This time, books, not scrolls. That's how far apart these two events are. The books were in wooden chests, and our sources say that the mob came in, they destroyed the temple. We know that, but nothing else was mentioned. So we don't know what happened to those books. They could have been left alone. They could have been sold on the market. They could have spread out to other libraries. We don't know. But you can't say the Christians did it because there's no proof. And the third possible villain is the Muslims. In 641, the Rashidun Caliphate invaded Egypt. The commander, Ibn al-As, was told about the library, this library being the Serapeum, remember, not the museum. The museum was an 800-year-old memory at this point. The commander, Ibn al-As, was told about the library and its books. He wrote to the caliph asking what to do with the library, what to do with the books, and the caliph replied, if the books were in accordance to the Quran, then you can get rid of them because the Quran is enough. And if the books were not in accordance to the Quran, they need to go. So either way, the books need to go, right? And so the books were sent to the bathhouses as fuel for the fires. And there were enough books that the bathhouse fires burned for 6 months. This story was written 600 years later. The Muslims invaded Egypt. 600 years later. And no sources were cited. The answer here is much simpler. Multiple historians have denied this theory. You would think a Christian Egypt, being conquered by Muslim rulers, would have written about how much the Muslims destroyed, and part of that destruction being the library, but there's no mention of it. In reality, the commander who conquered the city, Ibn al-As, when writing about the city, he never mentioned the library once. Some historians go as far as to say that spreading this misinformation is another form of Islamophobia, because there are people on this planet who think Muslims do nothing but destroy. They think that. And if you say Muslims destroyed the Library of Alexandria, you are contributing to that idea that Muslims do nothing but destroy. So, that's the truth behind the legend. And here's the question that I have been wondering for years now. As of right now, you all know what I know, pretty much. So I'm going to complain to you for a little bit. Why do people care so much about this library when it didn't have that many scrolls, right? And it wasn't destroyed by nefarious villains. Why do people care about these freaking library? Why do historians on the internet keep talking about this library? Do you not remember when we are right now? Not where we are, when we are right now. We get all excited about this old library that had like a few hundred books, but I could drive that way 10 miles to Barnes & Noble, or I could drive that way 10 miles to Mr. K's, which have 100 times more books than the Library of Alexandria. And for $20 to $50, I could buy any book in there, And those businesses are failing all across this country because people don't read like they used to. Why do people care so much about this library when we have the Library of Congress? Do you know how many books the Library of Congress has? 39 million. It is the biggest library in the world, not the country, the world. Did you know that it is very likely that your local library has more books than the Library of Alexandria? How many of you go to the library instead of buying a book? I knew that. Statistically, the amount of library visits over the past 15 years has been going down. I mean, let's just make this about me for a second, okay? I personally own over 500 books, okay? So just me, I have more books than the Library of Alexandria. Like, just me, right? And yet I spend my free time on my phone or on YouTube. And I bet there's a lot of people in this room that they would love to read more, but they don't. They take up more of their time looking at screens instead of pages. We want to be readers. We idolize readers. Readers are leaders. Readers are smarter. Readers are well-rounded and cultured and cool. But we don't put in the time. Maybe we idolize the Library of Alexandria legend because it supports what we want our lives to be like. The Library of Alexandria fits the model of our better nature. Readers, not watchers. Think about that more. What are legends and stories that you love to think about? And what do they suggest on what you value, what you find important? And are you actively trying to manifest that in your life, or do you just keep thinking about it but never make a change? Okay, so you're probably wondering, Bradley, you said all these things that didn't happen to the Library of Alexandria. You going to tell us what did happen? Like, you keep saying, nah, not that, nah, not that. Are you going to say what did happen to the library? What destroyed the Library of Alexandria, Bradley? Unfortunately, it's not a sexy answer. But what killed the Library of Alexandria is the same thing that kills any library: lack of funding. Colin Higgins writes, "We have been primed to believe that the Library of Alexandria ended with a bang. But what if it ended with a whimper? A victim of the humid and variable literal climate, budget cuts, and administrative disinterest. That library was successful because it was backed by the government. Remember the story. The government paid for scribes to copy these books. The government made a rule that any ship that docked had to give their scrolls over. And remember that the library wasn't just a place of books, it was an institution of learning. Scholars, paid by the government, worked there. The government invested their money in arts and sciences because they found it important. And instability in the government, constant invasions, civil war, put the library on a lower list of priorities. Not to mention that future rulers would go after the scholars in the library who backed their enemies, compelling those scholars to leave to go to another library outside of Egypt before they got murdered." President John F. Kennedy, who created the Kennedy Center, he once said that the arts are very close to the center of a nation's purpose and is a test of the quality of a nation's civilization. He also said that there's a connection, hard to explain logically but easy to feel, between achievement in public life and progress in the arts. The age of Pericles was also the age of Phidias. The age of Lorenzo de' Medici was also the age of Leonardo da Vinci. The age of Elizabeth, also the age of Shakespeare. A government that invests in science and art is a good government. President John Adams, he wrote a letter to his wife. He said, "I must study politics and war so that my sons may have the liberty to study painting and poetry, mathematics and philosophy. My sons ought to study mathematics and philosophy, geography, natural history, architecture, navigation, commerce, and agriculture in order to give their children a right to study painting, poetry, music, architecture, statuary, tapestry, porcelain." Do you understand? Do you get it? If a country focuses on arts and sciences, it's a sign we're evolving as a civilization, not devolving. It's a sign of success. Let's not yearn and reminisce about the glory days of the past when reading and the search for knowledge was a priority of a civilization. Let's not give energy to that. Let us create today the legend we love so much. Read more books. Renew your library card. Go to your library. They have DVDs too. When the library faces budget cuts, show up to that town meeting and tell them how much you love books and libraries and how much they mean to you. When the government threatens to cut funding to universities and scientific research, because that was part of Alexandria too, show up and speak up. I don't want my country to be a country of politics and war, in the words of John Adams. I want my country to be a country of mathematics, philosophy, painting, and poetry, of the sciences and arts. That is what makes a lasting impact in the world, how much we contributed to the human spirit long after we're gone. Thank you.
Together, we have enjoyed the warmth and beauty of stories of this flame and of this special community. As our chalice flame is extinguished this morning, we can still remember that its glow is carried within us. We can use our inner lights and this flame to kindle new sparks throughout our lives and in the world. May the spirit of peace and togetherness bless your lives. We thank you for being with us today. The Social Justice Committee will be meeting today in the res from 12:30 to 1:30. Women's Night is this upcoming Friday, August 1st at 6:30 p.m. Email womensgroup@hvuuc.org for more information. CUPS will be celebrating Lamos this Saturday, August 2nd at 6 p.m. And you can email CUPS at cuups@hvuuc.org for more information on that. August 10th, we welcome Dr. Jennifer Adler to our Sunday service, and we'll have a workshop following it, in which we'll gain new insight into what religion has meant and continues to mean in Appalachia. Childcare will be provided for this workshop. You can learn more about the many opportunities for fellowship, justice work, and working together by visiting our website, hvuuc.org, and checking out our news and events section. Our closing hymn is The Ceaseless Flow of Endless Time, number 350 in the gray hymnal. And this is also when we will pass the offering plate. The contributions that you make to us during this offering supports the way that we build each other up within this community, and also gives us the resources to stretch out into the wider world to make a positive impact. If you're making a pledge payment, please mark it as such. And thank you so much for your contributions. Please rise with us and body or spirit for our closing hymn, The Ceaseless Flow of Endless Time, number 350. Soul Music by Terry Pratchett. The library didn't only contain magical books, the ones which are chained to their shelves and very dangerous. It also contained perfectly ordinary books, printed on commonplace paper in mundane ink. It would be a mistake to think that they weren't also dangerous, because reading them didn't make fireworks go off in the sky. Reading them sometimes did the more dangerous trick of making fireworks go off in the privacy of the reader's brain. Thank you.